Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dianna McCarthy, and I would like to thank our panel members and audience for attending today's important event wrapping up Women's History Month and celebrating women in law enforcement. I would also like to thank our events committee composed of Patrick Slattery, Christine Valencia, and Judy DeWolf, who recently volunteered to help out. And finally, I would like to thank my co-moderator, Judy Germano. Our event today is meant to be a training session, and as such, we will not be commenting on current events or any ongoing investigations. This is an InfraGard event. InfraGard is celebrating its 25th birthday this year. It was founded in 1996. We are a public-private collaboration with the FBI with over 75 members representing 77 InfraGard chapters nationwide. Which are geographically linked to the 56 FBI field offices, enabling law enforcement and the American business community to collaborate on localized educational programs, training events, and information sharing initiatives that help mitigate threats and promote safety and security. InfraGard represents 16 critical infrastructure sectors identified by the Department of Homeland Security, including agriculture and food, chemical, commercial facilities, communications, critical manufacturing, dams, defense industrial base, emergency services, energy, financial services, government facilities, healthcare and public health, information technology, nuclear reactors, materials and waste, transportation systems, and finally, water and wastewater systems. I've been a member of the New York Metro InfraGard chapter for roughly 6 years, and I've served as its secretary for almost 2 years. I'm a partner and recently appointed Chief Diversity Inclusion Officer for the law firm Wingett Spadafore in Schwartzburg. My practice includes cybersecurity and privacy and employment law. I am based in our New York office. I am also a member of the Professional Liability Underwriters Society and a vice president of Women in Cyber Leadership. I am a member of the Pace University Cyber Advisory Board, and finally, I am a 2019 graduate of the FBI Citizens Academy. I would now like to introduce you to our current FBI coordinator, Steve Wintonock. Steve replaced Karen Walsh as our coordinator.
Thank you, Diana. As Diana said, my name is Steve Wintonock, and I'm a special agent with the New York office of the FBI. I am also FBI New York's InfraGard coordinator for the New York Metro IMA. I would like to welcome everyone to the webinar today. I want to thank the New York Metro chapter for assembling a tremendous panel of women in law enforcement for today's event. Before we start the webinar, there are a few administrative items I'd like to cover. As Diana said, this webinar is designed to be a training session. Nothing that is said today should be considered advice or testimony or any kind of official statement. Additionally, if there are any members of the media in attendance today, please forward any questions or requests to FBI New York office's Office of Public Affairs. Also, if you have questions, please use the questions tab on the platform. We'll do our best to answer the questions you've posted. Thank you. And now I'll turn it back over to Diana.
Thank you, Steve. That was very helpful. I'd like to now turn it over to Judy and have Judy introduce herself to us.
Thank you, Diana. Well, welcome. I'm delighted to be collaborating with InfraGard today on this terrific program. I'm a distinguished fellow and professor at the NYU Center for Cybersecurity and also a senior fellow in the Reese Center on Law and Security. And I currently also have my own law firm, Germano Law, LLC. Before that, for 11 years, I was a federal prosecutor. And throughout my career, I've worked in law enforcement as a prosecutor, the financial sector in many of the cases that I've handled then and now, and also in cybersecurity, all of which are very male-dominated professions. But through that career, I have had a wonderful opportunity to work with just amazing women. And one of the things that I do at NYU is run the Women Leaders in Cybersecurity, bringing together women from around the country and sometimes internationally to talk about their important work. And today, as mentioned, it's a training session, but it's really an opportunity for all of you to meet and hear from amazing women in law enforcement. We have a terrific panel of attorneys and leaders and different folks. I'll give you their titles and introduce you, and you will see the mix, but women who are in different leaderships at the Bureau, the NYPD, but Port Authority, the undercover folks, and some who have transferred to private sector and can talk about that as well. So I'll go in alphabetical order, and you'll see we have Mary Jo Irvin, who's Associate Division Counsel of the Washington Field Office of the FBI. Allison Esposito, Deputy Inspector, New York City Police Department. Courtney Foster, Associate Director of Global Security at Merck and a former Supervisory Special Agent of Newark Field Office of the FBI. And Norma Hardy, Assistant Police Chief, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, retired, and the current Director of Security at the South Park Mall in Virginia. Nancy Hoppick, who's the Chief Assistant of the Kings County District Attorney's Office, a former Assistant Deputy Commissioner of the New York Police Department, a former Executive Deputy Attorney General of the Division of Criminal Justice of the New York Attorney General's Office, and a former Chief of the Criminal Division of the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Jersey, where I got to work with Nancy back when. And then Jacqueline McGuire, Special Agent in Charge of the New York Field Office of the FBI. Verna Tosado, who is a retired sergeant with the New York City Police Department, and Karen Walsh, Global Crisis Manager, Twitter, former Special Agent of the FBI, former InfraGard FBI Coordinator, as mentioned, and also a former Captain, Platoon Leader, and Executive Officer of the U.S. Army. So welcome, esteemed panelists. I'm so delighted to share this time with you over the next, we have 2 hours from 12 to 2. And so hopefully our audience can join us for that window. I know that each of you could tell us stories for the full time. That would be fascinating. So we'll try to cover what we can and hit some of the key topics. I give your titles, but it would be great for the audience to hear more about you. So if you could just, let's start with, if you talk about what your current job is, beyond the title, what your roles and primary responsibilities are, and how long you've been on the job. So I'll start with you, Mary Jo, please.
Hello, my name is Mary Jo Irvin. I'm Associate Division Counsel at the Washington Field Office of the FBI. My job is to provide legal and policy guidance for agents working investigations at Washington Field, criminal, counterintelligence, and counterterrorism.
Thank you. And Allison.
Good morning, or good afternoon now. My name is Allison Esposito. I'm a Deputy Inspector with the New York City Police Department. I'm the Commanding Officer of PSA 3, which very much like police precincts, there's police service areas, and I'm responsible for the housing developments in 7 different precincts in Brooklyn North, which covers probably about 22 or 24, depending on whether they're going private, 24 developments within the city. So I have about 320 uniformed officers under me, and we deploy into 7 precincts in the city. I welcome everybody to, I hope we have a wonderful panel.
Thank you. And Courtney.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Courtney Foster. For the past 2 years, I've been working for Merck on the global security team. I'm focused on workplace violence prevention. Prior to Merck, I worked for the FBI in New York and Newark for 20 years, and I worked primarily public corruption and white collar crime.
Thank you. Norma?
Hi, my name is Norma Hardy. I'm currently retired from the Port Authority Police Department after 26 years there. I also worked for New York City EMS for 5 years prior to that, so I know about the PSAs. I was actually in 2 in my career. So I'm just excited to be here and share some of my experiences with all of you wonderful Wonder Women, and I'm looking forward to having the panel done.
Thank you. Nancy?
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nancy Hoppick, and I work with Allison in the beautiful borough of Brooklyn, New York. We're the 4th biggest DA's office in the country. We have about 1,100 employees, 500 lawyers, and I oversee the practice of the office. I've been here for about 3 years.
Thank you. Jacqueline?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jackie McGuire. I'm currently the Special Agent in charge of the Criminal Division here in the FBI New York Field Office. I've been in this position for about 16 months, having come up from FBI headquarters. And I oversee in our New York office all the criminal programs from traditional crime, public corruption, violent gangs, guns, drugs, healthcare fraud, the whole gamut. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
And Verna.
Good afternoon. My name is Verna Tosado. I am a retired sergeant of 25 years with the New York City Police Department. I have various titles within the 25 years. I did patrol in 10 years in Brownsville, Brooklyn North. I was an instructor in the academy. I got promoted to sergeant, went to the Transit Bureau, and then I did some various things, but also I was also in the leadership development in the police academy as well. Anyone that got promoted from the ranks up to sergeant, lieutenant, and captain. And then my last assignment, I was under the Patrol Services Bureau of Chief of Patrol, which oversaw the new NCO program, the Neighborhood Policing program. So I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. And Karen.
Nice.
Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Walsh. I currently serve as a crisis manager at Twitter, working on global resiliency, which is a fancy word for if something interrupts business. I work with the team to make sure things get back on track. So that's what I'm doing at Twitter.
Okay.
Well, thank you. So if people were thinking about whether they wanted a career in law enforcement, I think seeing all of you amazing women and the cool stuff you're doing is certainly incredibly inspiring. So thank you again for joining us. If I can hear from each of you, and I'll go now in reverse alphabetical order just to keep it interesting, either why you got into law enforcement or how you got into law enforcement or your career path, just what's your story? Just briefly though in the snippet. So Karen?
Yep, so the Army paid for my college. So I went to the military academy, graduated from there and did my service to the US Army. And then coming out of the Army, I randomly was recruited into the FBI by a parent of one of my cadets that I was teaching at ROTC. So my foray into law enforcement is completely random. I am proof perfect that you don't have to have anybody in your family who's ever served in law enforcement to serve a whole career in law enforcement and be very happy with it. So I joined the FBI, went to New York City. From New York City, I took an undercover assignment to Charlotte, North Carolina. I volunteered back to New York City for my last year because I love New York City, and hopefully we'll get to chat a little bit about InfraGard too, because it's a great little program. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. And Verna, how about you?
Okay, like myself, I also didn't have family on the job, but I think law enforcement it's a calling. I had a personal experience when I was about, I would say about 12, 13, that I actually walked into someone burglarizing my house. So I didn't like the way it was handled. I didn't like the fact that my parents didn't speak well in English. So I just didn't like the whole experience. And I said to myself, wow, you know, I would like to someday make that better. I got the calling again when I was in high school. I met an officer that had the beat around my high school, and we started talking, and I just knew that's something that I wanted to do. You know, some people are born into it, some people get the calling, some people just want to try it out, and I just felt like I had the calling for it. And it's, you know, 25 years later, I had to say it was a great experience. There were good times and hard times.
Thank you for answering that call. Jackie?
Sure. I was actually a science major in undergrad. I got my bachelor's of science, so I was on the pre-med route and thought I would go into medical school, and decided at such a young age that I wasn't ready for that commitment. So I became interested in forensic science. I like the idea of combining the criminal justice along with the science aspect of it. And I was fortunate out of college to get an internship at the medical examiner's office in Suffolk County, Long Island. And that summer, there was a tragic accident off the coast of Long Island with TWA. Flight 800 went down, and our office received the remains of the victims of that plane crash. And also, we received many FBI personnel who came in to work the case. I was lucky enough to meet a lot of really good people and started to talk to them, and became interested in applying to the Bureau. So went back to grad school for criminal justice and started my path into the FBI Academy.
Thank you. Nancy?
So I guess my story is I was raised by my mom, and I watched her struggle financially. So I just knew I wanted to have something in my hand always that I'd be able to take care of myself. And my 12-year-old self convinced myself that that was a law degree. So I had to go to law school at night. I couldn't afford to do otherwise. And I sort of knew I wanted to go into public service. So I didn't want massive law school debt. So one day at my law school, there was a sign posted for a paralegal position at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I applied for it. I'd been a paralegal at a real estate law firm for my first year, and that's where I got the bug. I just was, that was the end of it. I worked next to agents and prosecutors, and I was just so inspired about the work I saw them doing that I pretty much never left.
That wasn't the end of it. That was the beginning of it, right?
Yeah.
Norma?
Yeah. Yes, it's interesting listening to everyone's story because I have a little piece of each of those that started me in the path of law enforcement. You know, growing up in Brooklyn, I did not have very good interactions with the local police department during the time that I was growing up because there was a lot of strife and a lot of problems in the Brooklyn area at that time, you know, in the 60s and 70s. So I was not having good experiences. So I would always say that, you know, one day I'm going to be a police officer and I'm going to treat people a certain way and I'm going to talk to them a certain way. And that started me on the thinking role. I actually chose to, I wanted to be actually a lawyer. So as I was growing up and I finished high school, I actually was going to John Jay Law School for a while. And I was actually working 3 jobs while I was going to school because my mom raised us alone also. And as I was going to school, we unfortunately had a fire and lost everything. We lost all our possessions. And I had to stop going to school to help take care of my family because I have 10 siblings. And I had to help my mom support the family. So I was very fortunate that I came up and I was able to join New York City EMS first. And through EMS, I answered every ad for every police department. And I saw that working in East New York and Brownsville in the 80s, that I really wanted to be a police officer. I was fighting battles every day anyway, being EMS in that area because it was during the crack area. So just experiencing that and working closely with the officers just gave me another step to want to start on that path. And then I was fortunate to be able to join the Port Authority Police in '92. So that was my stepping stones to deciding to go on the law enforcement path.
Thank you. So my father-in-law was on the job around that same time in that same place, and there are a lot of stories. I know you had a hard job then, for sure. Yeah. Courtney?
Yes, as like Verna said, it was a calling for me. I think since as long as I can remember, I wanted to be an FBI agent. My parents always told me I could do and be whatever I wanted as long as I set my mind to it and worked hard. So in 1990, I graduated college, and I always knew what the requirements were to get into the FBI, but I knew I had a lot of work to do. A bachelor's degree wasn't going to be enough, so I spent the next 8 years working in corporate. I also obtained a job with the local or county prosecutor's office working as a detective. And then I received my master's at night while I was working full time. And finally, I was competitive enough 8 years later to be fortunate enough to get accepted.
Allison?
Well, opposite of Karen, I do have family in law enforcement, and but I do agree with Verna and Courtney that it was a calling. My father has been my hero since as far back as I can remember. And what he instilled in me is that people who cannot protect themselves deserve to be protected. Couple that with a little bit of an adrenaline junkie in me and a passion for emergency medicine. And I could think of nothing else I would like to do in life. So I decided, I worked EMS, I did EMT work, I've done medical missions around the world, but I decided I early on wanted to be a member of the SWAT rescue team, and I used to call them the boys with the toys. Obviously a predominantly male role within the NYPD. I joined the NYPD about 24 years ago, following in my father's footsteps. And I requested some of the worst precincts in the city when I graduated. I wanted the 7-5 or the 7-3 in Brownsville or the 4-4 in the South Bronx. And my father being an inspector at the time, I wound up in Midtown. I don't know how that happened. But I was in Midtown for a while, and it taught me a lot, actually. It taught me how to speak to people. It taught me that you never know who you're talking to, so you better learn that it doesn't matter who they are, what they look like, or what they bring to the table. Everybody's on an even playing field. So it was a really wonderful life lesson with that. Yeah. I did some light undercover work there. And then finally, after about 6 years, I ended up joining ESU, and I was on the SWAT rescue team for a few years. That was an amazing experience, especially being one of, I was the only female in the SWAT training at the time. And I think after I graduated, I was only one of maybe 6 females in the unit that had more than 500 people in the unit. Another great experience. Then I was promoted to sergeant. I finally made my way to the South Bronx. I was in the 4-4 for a while. From there, I went through the FBI Academy, came back, went back to Manhattan, but I came back to Manhattan, albeit in a different kind of mindset, in a suit, and I took over some detective squads, did that for a few years, promoted again to lieutenant, went back to the South Bronx in the 4-3. Then from there, I went to commanding officer of ECT, which is a forensics investigation unit. And again, you don't know what you don't know. I realized for 3 years in the detective squad, I was screaming at ECT to do their job, and I had no idea what their job was. And then I was lucky enough to be their commanding officer, and I realized how passionate they were and what they brought to the table. And it was an amazing experience. From there, I was pulled to gang, and I was a lieutenant in gang doing investigations of violent street gangs. We did a lot of long-term, large case takedowns that were both federal and state. Another great learning experience. Then I was promoted to captain, and I finally made my way to Brooklyn North. I was the executive officer of the 7-7 precinct, and then the 7-3 precinct in Brownsville. And I can attest to what Norma and Verna said. It can be a brawl in Brownsville. But again, one of the greatest experiences I had in my life. The cops are genuinely there to protect the people and to be part of the community. And I spend more time at work than I do at home. So I genuinely believe I'm a part of the community as well. And I learned so much from the residents in Brownsville. It was phenomenal. And from Brownsville, I was promoted to inspector, and I took over PSA 3 in Brooklyn North. And again, amazing experiences, learning from different people, and neighborhood coordination, as Verna said, has really taken off, and the philosophy is really being embraced by our communities, and I couldn't ask for a better position. So thank you for having me. My career path, it was I guess started from watching my father, but it has enhanced and kind of snowballed throughout the years, because I continue to believe that 99.9% of our officers believe that those who cannot protect themselves deserve to be protected, and we are willing to step into that role. So thank you.
Thank you. And Mary Jo.
So like a lot of the ladies, I think even as a young person, I had a curiosity about law enforcement, but I didn't have family or community connections to law enforcement. So whenever I'd meet an officer or an agent, I'd ask them as much as I could about the job. But I ended up going to law school, and I'll say I went to law school with Dianna. We won't say how many years ago it was, Dianna. But pursued a career in the law, a couple of years clerking, a couple of years in private practice. And I found, for me, it was a little frustrating to come to a situation after the fact and to be placed on one side of what was always an argument. And I wanted to do something in public service, something where I felt like I could make a difference. And there's definitely different issues in law enforcement, different stressors and different frustrations. But I think the thing that still gets me out of bed, even 24 years on the job, is the ability to do good that day. So I've worked cases in public corruption, in economic crime, and in cybersecurity. All of them have been fascinating, but the theme is definitely public service and the ability to contribute to protect others.
Thank you. So I will share that usually in my work, I'm in a closed door office or have earbuds so my family can't hear. But Friday when we did our prep call, I was away and my kids were in the room. And after the call, they said, "Mom, who were those women? They were all so cool." And I was like, "Yes, I know." So, so thank you for sharing your stories and inspiring me and no doubt many others, including my kids. All right, I know you don't like to boast or whatever, but here's my question, so please answer. If you could tell us one of your greatest accomplishments in your career, and I appreciate there are a lot, but if you pick one, what is it and why is it significant? Jackie?
Sure. I've thought a lot about this answer over the years as a common interview question as you apply for different jobs. And I have to say, just at the baseline, I think my greatest accomplishment is becoming an FBI agent and joining an organization that, as others have said, that does good for a living. Our mission is to protect the American people and uphold the U.S. Constitution, and it doesn't get much better than that, to be able to come to work every day and have that mission behind you and in front of you that you strive for it all the time. So I think my greatest accomplishment is just being able to walk into the door at the FBI Academy to be sworn in by the then director Free. And since then, my career, I meet with new agents all the time who join us in the criminal division here in New York. And I would say that an FBI career is like a choose your own adventure novel. It's you get to choose the next step you want to take. And I think any career in law enforcement is like that you choose what the next chapter of your job looks like. And I've been very, very fortunate in the opportunities that I've been presented, in the opportunities that I've been able to seek out for myself. And as a brand new agent, I was a new agent at the time of the 9/11 attacks and became a case agent for that investigation for years afterwards. So again, I felt such a horrific attack, but I felt fortunate to be able to contribute something to it. Thank you.
Nancy?
I would agree with so much of that. It's just such a meaningful way to dedicate your life's work to helping people, helping victims of crime, even if it's just to empower them to understand the process, to get accountability in their case. And it's interesting, as you move up, what you miss is you move away from the front line of that, and the public service starts to feel, for me, almost helping the people who are delivering the frontline service have what they need to do it. You sort of miss that, but that's the general. The specific accomplishment I'm probably so proudest of is I was part of an effort at the NYPD to roll out body cameras to 36,000 police officers. And it's a device that's now omnipresent, but it's a big deal. The community is now going to be recorded in their interactions with the police. Police officers may be wearing a camera and they're going to be involved in a use of force incident, and there needs to be rules about when she can look at her camera. And so we had to develop a policy. And we studied best practices around the country, but before we released a final policy, we put our policy online for the public to comment on. We did it with an academic partner, and 25,000 people gave us their views. And 36,000 police officers were asked for their views too. And so we got a lot of opinions. It was a survey, but you could write, organizations gave us their thoughts, and we made about 10 changes because of the voice we gave others. And we didn't go along with, obviously a lot of suggestions, but what was great about it is it was this exercise in voice and transparency because we explained our answers. And I led that project, and I was really proud of it.
Thank you. And Courtney?
It's a really good question, and it's hard to answer with one accomplishment because I think that there were so many rewarding experiences in the FBI. I came into work cases. That was what I wanted to do, and I did that for my first 12 years. And we had a lot of successful prosecutions with the help of great U.S. attorneys' offices. And the next, being a squad supervisor and mentoring agents, whether they had more time in than me or they were new agents, just to see the excitement, that I felt day one being accepted to this job. And then another thing is, that comes to my mind is I was a phase 2 assessor for 15 years in the FBI. So I was able to see the next generation of agents that were coming onto the job, and being part of that process was just very important to me, and I was proud to be a part of it. And then just last, I think the friendships and the relationships that I've made over 20 years are just, you can't put words to it, just the value of the people in this job, and that I continue to connect with daily has been a great accomplishment.
Norma?
Let's see, greatest accomplishment. I would say being able to become the first female chief for the Port Authority Police Department. It was a long, hard road, and I wasn't even sure I would ever make sergeant. So going up the ranks and becoming the first woman chief was one of my greatest accomplishments. I think that one, and of course, paving the way for other women that were coming up through the ranks behind me. They still have a ways to go, but I feel that, I'm fortunate to have been a part of the process, if nothing else. And to be able to say that I was the first woman chief from such a wonderful department it feels like a great accomplishment to me. And also being able to have the career that I had, as I talked about, coming from where I had to come from as a youngster, and to make it to where I made it to throughout my career. I feel like that was one of my greatest and most proud moments.
Verna?
Wow, there's so many for me, but I guess I'll try to narrow it down to just a couple. I guess one of the greatest accomplishments is, I guess, being an instructor and then being promoted and being back to being an instructor. You don't realize when you're in front of a class that they remember you. Like you'll come down 10 years later, and I was an instructor and I taught police science, and I said something really meaningful to someone, and they run into you after 10 years, and they could quote my words. To me that's an amazement, and they thank me for giving that advice, for making that positive reinforcement. It's amazing to me. I even to today, when I run into someone that maybe I did in a promotion class in sergeants, and like I said, the transition from cop to sergeant is so crucial and so important that to me, that was one of my favorite classes to teach. And you just don't forget the impact you have on others. It's later in time that you realize it when someone comes back to you. And I guess one of my other accomplishments that I did not give up was getting my master's degree through this job. They gave an opportunity for us to further our careers, to further our education. And I got rejected the first time. And it wasn't for another mentor to tell me, don't give up, try again next year. And I did, and I got accepted. I took a leave with pay for a year to get my master's degree. And during a very difficult personal time as well. I was going through a divorce. I had 2 very young twin boys. And sometimes I kind of like look at myself and say, wow, you did it. Throughout all that turmoil, throughout that whole thing, you actually accomplished your master's degree and kept the 3.8 GPA in the middle of it all. So we're amazing people, amazing women out there, and we have the will and the strength to do it. And that's what I want to put out there.
Mary Jo?
I agree with all the ladies. It's hard to pick out specific examples. I do feel grateful for, there have been many significant events in law enforcement. Jackie mentioned 9/11 in DC and New York. There's always something happening. And when you have friends and family, 9/11 touched everybody in a certain way, but probably all of us had a finger in addressing that problem. And I feel like that's a really valuable thing. I appreciate at that time that I was able to contribute to that issue. And over the years, it's been wonderful to make so many connections, as Courtney said. My favorite years, I think, in my career were those that I supervised the cyber squad. Cyber really started to be a thing in the early 2000s, and things moved quickly, and there wasn't a lot of definition to what we were doing or how we were going to do it. But mentoring those agents and getting them the things that they needed to address the crime problem, that was my favorite time by far.
Allison.
Well, I agree. This is a really difficult question that requires a lot of thought. My first inclination would be, well, I got through SWAT school and 7 months of training and battled a fear of heights, and I did all that, which is all well and good, and I'm very proud of the accomplishment. But I think that law enforcement in general is a calling. Your accomplishments can be made up of many tiny events and their influences on people's lives, whether it's holding someone's hand when they're breathing in their last breaths of air, or comforting them when they are standing outside a crash scene when EMS is working on their children. Those tiny accomplishments, I think, contribute to our calling, law enforcement in general. If I had to put something on me, an accomplishment that I had that I think that it did impact the NYPD and definitely the female leadership. A few years ago, I don't know how it happened, but I got one of those. I was on patrol in the South Bronx as a lieutenant, and I got a call, one of those hold for the police commissioner kind of calls, and I had no idea what was coming next, but it turned out that somehow my name came up and they wanted me to represent the NYPD for a women's leadership networking conference and institution in Sarasota, Florida. And I was like, oh, yes, okay, yes, sir, whatever you want. And I had no idea why I was being tasked. And at first I was dumb enough to think I was speaking. And I called back and I said, what am I talking about? And they were like, no, you're not talking, you're attending. So I went, and the reason I bring this up is it's important, especially in a network like this of all ladies. And, I was relatively young, and I thought I was accomplished. And when they said it was a women's leadership event, I kind of went, oh, women's leadership. Okay, so it's going to be a week long of I didn't get this, or I didn't do that, or he did this, or he did that. And I was kind of like, ugh, okay, I'll, yes, sir, whatever you want. And I went down there and I couldn't have been more wrong. I met some seriously accomplished women, and I realized that I thought I was doing well, but I had so much more to tackle, and it was so possible out there. And these were women that hadn't forgot about other women. They were looking back, and they were grabbing hold of women and saying, you can do this too. As women, we kind of tend to eat our own, and these women were saying, no, I did it. There's a seat at the table for you. This is how to get there. And I got so hopped up, I flew back and demanded a meeting with the police commissioner, which I did not get. But I did get a meeting with the first deputy commissioner, and I convinced him to bring outside training to the NYPD, which they don't usually do. And the Women's Leadership Institute was brought to the NYPD, taught by the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And I hooked up with Verna, and we spent a few years putting that training out, where the NYPD ladies were about 50% of the class, and it was other law enforcement from around the country and around the world, and we were learning from each other, and it was just some phenomenal leadership training that was kind of women-centric that we hadn't had here in a while. So I think that would probably be one of my accomplishments.
Thanks. Karen?
So I would hope that at this point, the big message here is these women, all these amazing women, are having trouble narrowing down their most valuable moment, right? And it is very difficult. This moment was valuable to me in this way. This moment was valuable to me in that way. And I think that shows kind of the complexity of a career in law enforcement, that you don't have to. So another little secret I'm going to let you in on is Courtney and I were new agents together for the first 10 years of our career. And even though I have not seen her much in the last 15 years, I still think sometimes we split a brain cell. So, so I agree, like the thing I value the most out of my law enforcement career are all the relationships that I took with me. So I'm no longer in law enforcement. I don't carry a gun. I'm not on duty. But I still have lunch with all my friends. The officers were sadly killed in Florida this last month. I watched that funeral virtually with 26 undercovers on my phone. We cried, we did a shot, like there's all kinds of things that you take with you long after you serve. But to answer the question, because I recognize I was asked a question, I value my time on crimes against children squad. I was a street agent my entire career. I never did supervisor or chief or any of those big fancy jobs, which are awesome, but not for me. And so I worked several years on a violent crimes against children squad. And that's where I got heavy into crisis management, because obviously when things happen to kids, it becomes a crisis quick. And so I did a bunch, like around 15 command posts for missing children. And I think I think it was Berna's comment and Allison's for sure, even if you are not bringing the news to a parent that they have prayed for, it is still a valuable service because that family needs closure. And so you will have days where you go home and say, oh I can't even believe I get paid to do this. And then there are days where I go home and I'm like, they do not pay me enough to do this. Like this is so difficult, but that's part of that beautiful, awful, messy thing that we call a law enforcement career that spans over 2 decades and that you carry with you for the rest of your life. So that's me.
Thank you, ladies. My job as moderator is so easy. I just want to listen to you all talk because it's all fabulous and brilliant. I have one more question for the whole group, and then I'll mix it up and just, kind of take some other stuff, but really would love to hear from you all on what's a top lesson, 1 or 2 top lessons you learned during your career, or if it's the same thing, something you would tell your younger self that, if you were looking back and saying, oh, I wish I knew that, that would be great. So Mary Jo?
That's a tough one, I think. It sounds like all of us have followed our instinct, right? And so I think that stays with you even once you're in law enforcement. I remember when we sat down the first day at Quantico and they said, welcome to the next 20 years of your life. And I thought, oh, we'll see. I'm not so sure about that, but here we are. And so even within the field of law enforcement, trust your instinct. If you're being driven towards crimes against children, if you're feeling a calling towards a certain area, drive for that, make your connections, reach out to your networking folks, test that instinct, but go for it.
Norma?
What would I tell my young? I set out actually to be the kind of officer and up the ranks as supervisor, and I really didn't change much from when I was a sergeant. I learned a lot, but me as a whole, I didn't change much, and I think that's what I was able to lead my people as their chief. I was still out there. I was still making arrests. I didn't sit in an office. I was I was making car stops, and I could my cops were always like, "Is that the chief?" on the phone. So I enjoyed my career from the time that I was decided to take that career on, and even through the hard times and the rough times. So one thing I would say to my younger self is follow my thought of treating people the way I would want to be treated and the way that I would want my family members to be treated, and never ask anyone to, particularly your subordinates, to do anything that you would not do, because people will not lead a leader that leads from behind. They will not follow a leader that leads from behind. So those are the 2 things I would take from that question. Thank you.
Jackie?
Sure. as the other women were speaking, I was just trying to think of what I would tell my younger self. And I think the advice I would give is not to worry too many steps ahead, if that makes sense. Not to think too far out, because as I mentioned before, the opportunities that you're presented in a career such as the ones we all hold, you can't imagine what those opportunities could be when you're coming in as a new agent, as a new officer, as a new, line prosecutor. So I think it would be, don't worry too much, because things always work out in the end, and also be open to opportunities, things that you would not imagine. I spent some time down in Birmingham, Alabama as an assistant special agent in charge. I grew up in New York. If you told me 20 years ago that I would be living in Alabama, I would have told you were crazy. But it was one of the great opportunities and experiences of my career to see a much different, different area of responsibility, a different office, a much smaller office than New York or Washington, where I'd been previously. So I think those two pieces of advice of don't overly worry about, 2 steps ahead or 3 steps ahead, just work hard at what's in front of you and be open to opportunities that you could never have dreamed about.
How about you, Verna?
Wow. When I saw this this question, I said, what would I tell my younger self? Your career is in your hands. I know we're in a paralegal, paramilitary organization, but your career really is in your hands, and don't be afraid to apply to that specialized unit, because it's mostly male dominant. One of my littlest regrets is that I didn't become a detective, because you go to these networking events, and they're like, oh, so you're a sergeant, but you're a detective? Wow, that's awesome. Tell me about your field, and okay, chief. You want to meet the chief? No, the detective. I want to talk back to the detective. I want to hear about that. So it's one of my little regrets. But I would say to my younger self, listen. Sometimes you want to talk. You need to listen to people. Listening skills are so important in this job. And if you're ready giving a thought out before you're listening to someone, you're not going to do them justice. So I would say to my younger self, listen just a little bit more.
Courtney.
I think that what everybody's saying is right on. I think some of the greatest opportunities and growth I've had in the Bureau was when I was asked to do something that I wasn't planning for. After 9/11, I learned flexibility. I never worked nights in my life, and for the next however months, I was working 12-hour shifts every night. So I had to adjust that. But I think I was also on the crisis negotiation team, and I remember the lead came to me, and I only had a small minor role on the team, but he said, I need for you to teach a class, in 2 days at the academy, the police academy. We train locals in crisis negotiation. And I said, I don't know how to teach. How am I going? He's like, well, you're going to figure it out, and you're going to have a certified instructor with you, and here's the topic. And so I said, oh my gosh. So I did what I had to do, and then I realized afterwards that I wanted to get more comfortable with it. So I went through the FBI instructor school so I could be a certified teacher, which I did, and I ended up teaching, public corruption. So it was a great learning opportunity. I think in the beginning, I needed to, if I told myself, you have to step out of your comfort zone, because that's where I think the most growth comes.
That's a good way to teach crisis, right? Hey, or to learn crisis. Go teach a crisis class. You got 2 days. Listen, how about you?
Me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't sure what you said. Okay, so the two top lessons, or 1 or 2 top lessons I think I learned over my career is, if I had to sum it up in a word, I would say be unafraid. And much to what Verna was speaking to. I've always in my career taken the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference, or the harder road. And I think we as women, we sell ourselves short. And if you look at a job posting and there's 10 things on the job posting, a guy looks at it and goes, I got 3 of them, and those are the main 3 I'm going to apply. And a woman will not apply until they kick off every single box. And I think, I think diversifying I diversified my resume. It's something I learned during my career. Be unafraid, take that shot, apply to that specialized unit, have the confidence in yourself. You don't, my mother always said, you know more than you think you do, or you're better than you're giving yourself credit. And I think we sell ourselves short as women. So I think that that's something that we have to really keep in mind when we're going through the 20, 25 years, whatever we put into any field. And if I were going to say something to my younger self, it would really be enjoy every level, enjoy every experience. It goes by like this. And I know that sounds like an old person's comment because everybody's been saying it. I remember being in the academy and they'll go, kid, 20 years goes like this. I swear to God, it was yesterday I was raising my right hand. And you don't know the value of a moment until it's passed. And again, working on those relationships and being able to watch a funeral with some of your closest compadres who you've shared life and death and adrenaline situations with, and being able to break in each other's arms and lean on each other when you need it. And just the normal joking and back and forth that goes along with this amazing field that we're in. And the sixth sense of humor that goes along with the amazing field that we're in. But enjoy every second and every experience because it really is going to make you who you are.
I love that. If I can just mention, the be unafraid advice is awesome, but I'm not as cool as you. So I try to take that and then say, and even if you are afraid, just fake it that you're not. So I have to modify that just a little bit, but I'm trying. I'm still
working through your fear. I mean, listen, like I said, I was afraid of heights so much that I have to,
yes.
If something doesn't have a railing,
Yes.
I have to crawl my way down. But just have the confidence in yourself to thrive in spite of your fear.
Great. And Karen, how about you?
Yes.
So mine's kind of along the same theme. I think when I read this question, my thought was be honest. Just be honest. It's okay if you feel like crying today because something really bad happened yesterday. It's okay that you stand up in front of a group of people and have to teach a class and you are not 100% sure of the material. You can just say, this is the first time I've ever taught this class. And I'm really nervous. And you would be surprised at the amount of grace that people afford you when you are just honest about it. And I think the problem that comes with being in such a male-dominated environment is women tend to get in, not every woman, but women tend to get in, definitely me, and say, I'm not enough. And if I'm honest about the fact that I'd really like to cry right now, or if I'm honest about the fact that I don't remember exactly how this weapon breaks down because the last time I did this was 2 years ago in Quantico and now I'm being put on the spot, and then you get that anxiety or what if I'm on the firing range and I shoot worse than all the guys around me? Do they think, oh, it's because she's a girl? Like stop with all of that. Just be honest. You have the skills that you have. Bring those skills to the table. They will be enough. They will be enough. And if they're not, go get training and get better skills. But you will be enough if you just come to the table with what you've got.
On the negative talk part, my favorite bit of advice for myself, which I read in a book called Run Like a Mother, was don't ever say to yourself what you wouldn't say to your best friend. And I thought, that's good advice I needed to hear. But to my friend Nancy Hoppick, your turn. Tell us.
So I think I would tell myself two things. I would say you're going to be right about what your mother taught you. Just work hard, add value, respect your colleagues, respect everyone, and it's going to work out. And then I would tell myself something else that would get lost on me because I'd be too young and I'd have to experience it. But I would still I try to tell myself, and I'm afraid to say this a little bit because in front of this crowd, because they actually are people who carry guns and do things, the acronym I'm about to share with you. So I had this aha moment actually when I was at the NYPD watching a course on tactics. And they probably added a letter to the acronym, but what the instructor said was, when you're dealing with this critical situation, whether it's a shooter, they said time, distance, and cover. You need these things: time, distance, and cover. And the aha moment I had was, I think this works for anyone in any job and even in relationships, but I think it definitely works in our world, and I think it's especially helpful for women. You will encounter conflict. You will encounter, and a lot of the conflict is on the inside of the job. And the best thing you can do is not react so quickly. That what you need is a little time to think about the conflict. You might need even a little distance, and that comes with the time. And you might need a little cover, like from your allies, or from preparation or more information. Because what I found happened for me was, I kind of had a charmed existence in the early part of my career because I was in organizations that were half women. Being a woman helped me as a sex crimes prosecutor. But then I hit a certain point as you go up that you do experience some of people looking past you because you're a woman, or not talking to you as the person seated at the table. And two things happen. One, it's happening and you're right. And sometimes it's happening and you're actually wrong. And so all those, being that person that my mother told me to be, just work hard, add value, and respect your colleagues, they take you a long way to navigating this. But sometimes they sometimes call it an authority trap. Sometimes you feed into the problem if you don't navigate it with smarts, composure, and competence. So I use that. I try to use that as an anchor in navigating conflict.
All super, super advice, not just for my younger self, but for the me right now. So thank you. Thank you, ladies. You all have very different and super impressive background. I'd like to just talk a little bit about training or degrees or certifications, different things that may be needed. So Norma, I'm going to start with you. You're often recognized as a trailblazer, and for good reason. In 2011, you were the first Black woman in the history of the Port Authority Police Department to obtain the rank of inspector. And then in 2013, as you mentioned, you were the first woman to reach the rank of Assistant Chief of the Port Authority Police Department. And given your positions there, what training or experience helped you prepare for those roles?
Okay, well, I think experience is a big one because of, what we were dealing with throughout my career. I was actually in the World Trade Center for the first bombing. So, that was my first experience as a brand new officer. I had a building blow up around me. I like to tell people that. And that comes back to what was just talked about facing fear. Knowing that you're afraid, but not showing it. And that was really, really what I did on that day and into those few days that we were there. The same thing with 9/11. I also can pull from the statement of being able to cry with your coworkers. We did a lot of crying, as you know. The Port Authority, unfortunately, lost 37 officers that day. And we continue to lose officers now, even now, from 9/11 diseases. So I think experience had a lot to do with me being able to move on and having people that were willing to share those experiences with me, especially on the job. I think as far as training with myself, I always have looked for training, no matter where it was offered. So I would go out and I would, I belong to a few organizations, law enforcement organizations. My longest, the longest one I've been a part of is MALI, which is the Mid-Atlantic Association of Women in Law Enforcement. I belong to International Association of Women Police, the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. And I take whatever training comes available whenever I can. I haven't missed a MALI conference. I've missed one MALI conference and since 2002 when I joined. So I go to all the conferences and I think they offer just wonderful training. I also, I read all the time. I stay up on law enforcement. Even though I'm retired, I still like to stay up on law enforcement. I stay up on security issues because I'm now a director of security at a mall here in Virginia. So I try to, I get all the magazines talking about today's issues in security. I still stay current on law enforcement problems. You know, I watch that very closely because I also speak. I speak at police academy graduations. I speak, well, really, if anyone asks me to speak, I'm fine with speaking. But I like speaking to young officers, and I like being told by the young officers that I make such a difference to them. I've had, you know, officers come up to me crying because they were just so happy to hear somebody that has gone through some of the things that they've gone through. So I think experiences and training work hand in hand. I think if you just train and don't see the other aspect of what you're doing and the more humanized part of what you're doing, you can train and you can be the best at it and you can pass every training session you've ever had. But as far as it making you better at what your job is, you have to incorporate that human experience also.
Thank you. Jackie, you have not one but two master's degrees, which I don't think is the requirement, but a question of generally what types of education and background is helpful, and are the higher level degrees, you know, valuable for rising in the Bureau? This is a compound question. And I understand that the Bureau also offers certain training and certification opportunities. And Verna mentioned at the NYPD, she was able to get her master's. But if you could talk to us a little bit about your background and the benefits, or generally what the Bureau offers and expects. That was a really long, twisted question, but you're with me, okay? To you, please.
So like Verna, I actually was received the benefit of a master's degree through the FBI and kind of working backwards in my career. So my second master's degree was through the Naval Postgraduate School, and the FBI has great programs, sabbatical programs, where you either leave your current job and go full time to school for, you know, any length of time to receive a master's. Mine was a part-time program, but again, that was a great opportunity that was offered, that I pursued it. At the time, I was working counterterrorism issues, so it was a great fit to look at Homeland Security issues. And the best part of that, and any opportunity like that, is the networking, is getting out. It was a program that was not only federal, Homeland Security, so across the board. It wasn't only law enforcement, it wasn't only, you know, Department of Homeland Security, but it was state and local agency representatives as well, public health officials, emergency management officials. So just those networking opportunities, in addition to the academics and the education benefits from it. When I was applying, I am similar to Courtney, I think, who said she had pursued her master's degree in applying to the Bureau just to be more competitive. These days, I think masters are kind of a little bit of a dime a dozen. I think you really need one to compete. Getting into the FBI is very competitive. We get literally tens of thousands of applications for agents per year, and a very, very small percentage of those people are hired. And just as I was applying, it was trying to, you know, not only get the work experience that's required to apply, but also to get that foot up. You know, what is going to make me a more attractive candidate? As I mentioned before, I had a science background, so I focused on the criminal justice because it isn't something that I had, you know, really experience or education in. So I thought that balance would be, you know, attractive and make me competitive. That was my experience. I think the best advice I've heard, and I tried to give to others, in what sort of education or degree programs should people pursue if they are interested in a career in the FBI, is pursue something you're passionate about. When I was coming out of high school, I was passionate about science. I love science courses. I wouldn't want someone to go into science just because they think it's going to make them more competitive. You know, do something that you're passionate about, because that's going to come across when you're trying to get into any agency, and you're going to carry those skills. You know, the FBI, NYPD, any law enforcement organization is going to teach you the tactical skills that you need. You go through the academy for that purpose. You'll learn. I never had shot a gun before getting into the FBI academy. The FBI taught me to shoot a gun very well. I don't have a legal background. They taught me legal issues. So it's what can you bring? What can you offer to the FBI? And whether that is, science, any sort of STEM, computer, cyber experience and education. But I think the best advice, everyone sort of routes their own path. Do something that you're passionate about, because you're going to be able to add value to the organization with what you've learned, what you've experienced. But then also, as you go through your career, you could also gain more out of it because you have that passion behind you.
And Karen, you mentioned that you're a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy and also a former captain and leader in the U.S. Army. How has your military service and training helped or impacted you in your career choices and the opportunities you had?
So I am with Jackie on this, that I have often been dubbed in my family as the queen of getting my education paid for by the government. So undergrad, compliments of the US Army, master's degree, compliments of the FBI. So for those of you who don't come from money, I do not come from money, you can get your education in a service job. So that has been great. Now, the training and education that I got at the Academy, I mean, I'm so grateful and blessed that I was afforded that opportunity and those friendships that last a lifetime from that. But what I really feel helped me to get entry into the Bureau was just being able to expand my world. I grew up, in a bunch of different towns. We moved around a lot, but there wasn't a lot of diversity where I grew up. And joining the military, I mean, the military is a cross section of our society. So every problem that we have in our society is in the military, and every beautiful celebration we have in our society is also in the military. So for me, the military helped me expand my view of the world and the people in it, and have some compassion and empathy for the people in it. And I think that's what really helped me to both get into the Bureau and then to serve effectively as an agent in the Bureau.
On the point of opportunities too, I should mention that with NYU, there's the Aspire program where you can actually get a scholarship for law school as long as you agree to spend time in government service for a period of time after. And it's a really terrific program that, again, is focusing on the need to, especially in the cybersecurity area, get more folks into the public sector where a lot of work needs to be done in cybersecurity. So there are certainly opportunities to get scholarships and education as long as you're willing to also do the public service, which is so critical and so cool listening to all of you. Allison, in addition to your work as a deputy inspector at the NYPD, you also teach leadership and motivation for the International Association of Chiefs of Police, you mentioned, and a certified instructor of fair and impartial policing. Have both the teaching and the certifications, how have they helped you and helpful for others on the job getting that?
Well, my mother used to say, if you're the smartest person in the room, find another room. And it's very, very, very good, true advice. Along what the chief was saying, what Norma was saying, never say no to training. Now, I had mentioned I ended up with an opportunity to go represent the NYPD and take this women's leadership course. And not only did I bring it back, it impressed upon them that I would like to become a motivational speaker and teacher for them, which happened. And I was scared out of my mind doing it. But again, you never say no to a new opportunity or a new training. And it allowed me to understand really that just because I'm standing in the front of the room and I'm the instructor or the facilitator or I'm the motivational speaker doesn't mean that I don't have a lot to learn from the other individuals in the room. So it broadened my horizons. It allowed me to become an instructor, a motivational speaker, but it also exposed me to so many different perspectives and vantage points and viewpoints and experiences from people that I would not have known if I was NYPD centric, which is why when we brought the training, we didn't want all 50 or 60 individuals to be from the NYPD, because then it's, you know, status quo, business as usual. When we bring in other people from different agencies, whether they're large or small, and you see that, you know, the NYPD, we're very fortunate. We have those radios on our belt, and backup is, you know, 30 seconds away. And when you fight for 30 seconds or a minute, it feels like an eternity. But imagine a SWAT team that's on call, and they could be, you know, 10 hours away, or your backup is 30 minutes away. You really learn how to talk to people a hell of a lot better than when backup is 30 seconds away. So the work I've done with the International Association of Chiefs of Police and Fair and Impartial Policing has afforded me the opportunity to realize that law enforcement exists on so many levels in so many areas, and that if we don't expose ourselves to different perspectives, much like what fair and impartial policing teaches in contact theory, if we don't expose ourselves to different perspectives, then you don't know what you don't know. So I would encourage everyone to never say no to training, and to learn not only from what the instructor is talking to you about, but the other individuals in the course, because there's a lot you don't know.
Nancy, you have a law degree, and both you and Mary Jo are lawyers in law enforcement. In your various roles, you've also hired and supervised people, lawyers, non-lawyers, different folks. What credentials or training do you look for certain positions?
You know, Judy, I think for us, it's mostly been prosecutorial hires that I've made, and in many of my various positions, it's right out of law school, you know. And so for these kinds of jobs, it's really the question of laterals. I would say laterals and management. And what we really look for is anybody who's had a job that has afforded them terrific training in writing. And for leadership positions, we really look for, and I found the successful hires and teams have been built with what you're hearing about today, which is diversity, not just the diversity of cultural diversity, ethnic diversity, but even professional diversity. So I'm a member of a front office that has people that have worked at the Drug Policy Alliance and the ACLU and have been prosecutors their whole life. And that team was built on purpose because our principal wants to hear different voices. So I think that's what we look for.
Great. And in addition to the degrees and the certifications and the training, there's also the membership in the associations. Norma mentioned her involvement. We're delighted to be here thanks to InfraGard. And Karen, you were the former InfraGard FBI point of contact. If you could talk a little bit about sort of the benefits of that.
Yeah, so InfraGard is a great little program that sadly, despite years of trying to get the word out, not everybody knows about. So I served as the InfraGard coordinator in both Charlotte and New York City. And, you know, in a nutshell, InfraGard.org has everything you'd need to know. I see also they dropped a brochure and a quick fax PDF in the handout link, but feel free to go. InfraGard.org tells all kinds of stuff about there's essentially what we're trying to do is bridge the gap between corporate America and students and, you know, lots of other folks and government. And it's an FBI sponsored, I guess, program, but it has all kinds of other organizations in it, including HHS, Secret Service, like all of the federal agencies contribute to this effort. And it's a great way to build relationships, get some of this mentorship that all these women have been talking about. You don't always have to be mentored by someone in your org. You could be mentored by someone else. It could broaden your horizons to have a mentor that's in the private industry when you're a government person, and vice versa. It's also a quick way, if you've got a problem, to call the FBI. There's all kinds of speaking engagements that you could do or you could attend, or you could send your employees to attend. And, you know, for me, I'm not a cyber head. I'm an engineer by education and then a risk manager. So I understand the risk that's involved with cyber, but I'm not super smart on all of that. So I learn every time I go to those seminars, and vice versa. In Charlotte, what we tried to do was we tried to balance cyber with healthcare or another type of industry. So, but all of those industries that contribute to InfraGard are all part of our critical infrastructures. So I know Dianna listed them in the beginning, but transportation, like I would be in a communications sector because I work at Twitter. Courtney would probably be in the healthcare sector because she works at Merck. So, and there's a law enforcement sector. So anyone still serving can join in the law enforcement sector. So you join in your sector, and ideally the trainings that are offered, you can go to all the trainings generally, but ideally the trainings that are offered in your sector, so you can get smarter on kind of how corporate America and the government work together in your sector. Is that fair?
Thank you. And Verna, you've mentioned that you were involved with the International Association of Chiefs of Police, and also that you had a lot going on, getting your master's degree, raising young twin boys, kind of managing an important job. Was it worth it to add an association into your very busy schedule and pie?
Well, are we Wonder Women? I don't know. No, I see
yes,
myself.
we are, but tell us why.
I think bottom line is, someone really smart told me that, you don't raise children alone, it takes a village. And that's the honest truth. If you don't have support in the home front, as women, we're nurturers. We're either taking care of children, we're taking care of elderly parents, we have pets, whatever it is. If you don't have that support, life becomes really difficult. And I was very fortunate to have amazing family. I come from a family of 9. I'm the youngest. And I couldn't have done it without my parents. I couldn't have done it without my sisters, my brothers, in the middle of it all. And I try to, explain that, when I taught my leadership courses, or when I was an instructor, that if you don't have some type of strong home front, then you find it within. You find a mentor. You find a fraternal organization. Now, I was a second VP for the Hispanic Society. So you find your ways of getting that support. And if you have that, if you have at least some foundation of that, everything's possible, not impossible. And that's how I saw it. That's how, I was a training sergeant when I got promoted to sergeant, and they knew that I came from the training bureau. I had like 12 to 15 rookies under me. And, and I was in transit, which was a whole different world from being on a foot up, they say below, down in the hole, to being actual out there, that, I was just as afraid as these rookies, because I was a newly promoted sergeant, and here I'm leading, men and women to do their job. And the way I found a way to really get it all together was that, I was citywide, so we would go from community to community to community. So I decided, okay, listen, I don't know what's going on in this community, so I would pick a rookie cop and said, do some research on the community they were going to police. What's their culture? What's, anything. Tell me something that, tomorrow we're going to hit Harlem. Tomorrow we're going to hit Brownsville. Tell me something about the community that we're going to go into, so you have an idea. And what I do before we go out, we'll have like a quick 15-20 minute meeting. All right, Officer Smith, what did you learn? What can you tell us as we're going to go policing? What can you tell us about this neighborhood? And to me, that was a tool that even to today, when I see, like I said, when I see these, these rookies, and they're now lieutenants, captains, and above, hey, Tosado, what you said, how you trained us, it's unforgettable. And and I kept that in the back of my head as I went up at the ranks of getting to know who we police. It's so important sometimes. And like I said, I was just as frightened as they were, but I couldn't show it. I had a lead. I had to show that I'm there. I have your back. But you need to know who are we policing, and that was a big big essential part of my training with these rookies. So training is essential. You know, refreshers are essential. You know, I'm big on networking. You know, whatever opportunities there is there. Like I say, you know, your career path is really in your hands. You could complain about, oh, I've been in this command for 5-10 years and I'm done with it. Then do something about it. You know, I was fortunate to have a mentor, you know, and it wasn't a female, a male mentor. As when I was in 10 years in Brownsville, I was burnt. I was done. I was like, I need to do something. 9/11 happened. I was trying to study for promotion. And he said to me, you need a change. And he literally drove me to the police academy and said, why don't you try being an instructor? You always take the lead in things. Why don't you be an instructor? And honestly, that opened up the door throughout my career. I made such a positive move. And it wasn't for that sergeant that said to me, it's time. You did your time. Let's go. Let's make a change. And that's the best advice I can give.
And a message for both the sergeant to realize the impact of helping and looking back to Allison's point earlier about making sure you're taking care of people all along the way. And then for people knowing, you know, that there's a lot of the importance of a network and the help that we can have. You mentioned 9/11. Norma, you were part of, you were a responder in the 1993 World Trade Center attack and received the World Trade Center Medal of Valor for your acts of courage there. And then again on September 11th, 2001, you were awarded the WTC Commendatory Medal for your work. How do you find the strength to handle such tremendous crisis? And what lessons can other law enforcement officers draw from that?
I think really it's different. The two instances being so completely different, and my time on the job made a difference also, because during the 93 bombing, I had just gotten out of the police academy. I think I was out for maybe 14 weeks, and just happened to be on patrol in the building when the bomb went off. And you know, I was listening, and you talk about scared. Yeah, I was totally terrified. And it was not only terrifying, it was more mentally and physically terrifying to me to be in a building that had just blown up. But then, because this is what I like to tell young officers when I speak to them, I had on a uniform. No one cared that I was afraid. No one cared that I was just more afraid than everyone else and I wanted to run away because I had on that uniform. So once I had on that uniform, everyone expected me to have the answers. You know, I knew nothing. I played it the best way I could for survival of me. But through survival of me, you know, thank God I was able to bring everyone out of the building with me, which were a bunch of people that I found in various hiding positions. So that makes a difference, you know, that just being able to remain calm, you know, and prayer. I will always tell you that I pray every day. And during that time, I prayed a lot for strength to be able to do what I had to get done. During 9/11, you know, I lived in Brooklyn at the time. I lived in Brooklyn where I could see the World Trade Center. So it was an impact not only to me as a first responder, because I actually was scheduled to work the afternoon tour. So I was not there yet. And for me, the problem was that I had a very good friend who worked with me. I was assigned to the Port Authority bus terminal at that time. And I kept calling him so we could meet up and we could go, because I saw the fire coming out of the buildings. I could see it from my apartment. And I kept calling him. And finally, I was like, where is he? And one of my sergeants called and informed me that he had actually went in early that day and he was already there. So me responding in was, again, prayer, again, being afraid. You know, once I told my mother I was heading into Manhattan, Of course, she was like, don't go, because she had dealt with all the trauma of the 93 bombing and not knowing where I was for over 12 hours. And I explained to her that I have to go. But, you know, nobody really thinks like, I'm going to go and I'm going to save the day and I'm going to be a hero. No, most of us will think I'm going to go and I'm going to help save people, but I'm going to go and be a support for my friends and my fellow officers and the EMTs, you know, and the firemen, because that's just how you are brought up, so to speak, in your departments, that you help each other and you look after each other. So that too, being able to deal with that, at the time, it was so many emotions going on to me, and so much of what I witnessed and what I saw. You know, people ask me a lot of times too, how do I, you know, how am I, as far as being able to speak about it. And I think that I am so fortunate and so blessed because I'm able to speak about it. I have friends that they can't speak about it still to this day, you know, and it's just a traumatic experience for them over and over. Do I have bad days? Of course, I have bad days. Everyone that knows me knows about my bad days. But on the whole, I would say that I've been able to deal with these things happening through first through God, secondly through a wonderful family, my support group, and wonderful friends, you know, and the ability to speak. That, you know, if something's bothering me, I will speak. So I think that's how I've dealt with these issues.
An unexpected surprise, Jackie, for 2020 and continuing now is the global pandemic, which has significantly changed how we all do our jobs. What impact has that had on the Bureau? How have you been able to pivot, and what's going to change long term as a consequence?
Sure, that's a great question, and one we talk about pretty frequently here. I think as far as how things are going to change for the long term, it's really to be determined. You know, I think we were forced into being a more mobile workforce. We, over time, have traditionally, you know, have our computers at our desks, and we've slowly tried to adapt to be a little more mobile. On the agent side, I don't like walking out and seeing my agents sitting at their desk. I want them to be out on the street. I want the squad areas to be empty, because that means they're out on the street talking to sources, talking to witnesses, and doing their job. So it was easy for them. They're usually a mobile group of personnel as it is. But across the board for our professional staff or intelligence analysts, it certainly jolted us, and I think made us realize we need to be more mobile. We need to deploy the technology that enables us to be more mobile. So I think it set us on the right path for the future, and we hope to be able to continue that. And it goes into recruiting, you know, what the future looks like for private corporations and whether people do go back into an office or work from home. You know, there's an attraction that people could sit at home and in their pajamas and work. We need to compete with that. We need to say, no, you actually have to get dressed and come to work with FBI. But what goes along with that is our mission, going back to our mission. You can't sit at home and protect the American people. We have a job with that really moral value. And it is going to be interesting going forward. It, I think, just adds an extra piece of complexity in trying to make law enforcement, make the FBI attractive to people. But as mentioned earlier, you know, it is a calling. So if you want that calling, if you have that calling, I think people are going to be interested in it regardless. But the pandemic has definitely, you know, made us, again, take a hard look at technology. What can we do to be more mobile, more remote? And also taking care of our employees, you know, whether it was people who themselves got sick with the virus, whether they had family members. You know, here in New York, obviously, was the epicenter early on of COVID. And much like 9/11, you know, I know here in New York, everyone knows someone who's been affected in some way by COVID, by losing a loved one, losing a friend, having people have long-term effects from it. So we really put a lot of focus to make sure that our workforce was doing well, was as good as morale could be, and really taking care of people. So I think it's always at the top of their minds as leaders, but the past year has really reinforced that. Of as important as this job, as all the jobs that we have, as important as they are, people's health, people's families, people's loved ones, their life outside of work is just as important, and we need to be sure that they're taking care of that business as well.
Switching gears a little bit to life after law enforcement. Courtney and Karen, you both left the FBI and went to work for global companies. So Courtney, I'll start with you. Some of the experiences from transitioning to now a global pharmaceutical company at Merck, how has your bureau experience helped you in your new role?
I think everything I learned in the bureau translated over well to the company, and I'm fortunate to be here. So, I mean, just again, to reiterate, from working cases to supervising others, to the collateral duties I had and the relationships I made, I just think everything has transferred over very well, and I'm very, very happy to be here.
And Karen, how about you? And then also, how does somebody know when it's time? Factors to consider for the transition.
That's like the total hot button question, right? So,
counsel, you can decline to answer. No, but what can you tell us about the transition, making the transition, and
you're
factors?
Totally it's so I think I echo Courtney's answer that a lot of work in a case is like a project, and you start it out, you build a team, you solve for a problem, and then you go find another project, right? So that translates very, very easily. Although when you're serving, you don't always know that. So the last time I did a resume was 1997. When I applied to become an FBI agent. And then, as who was it, Mary Jo said, this will be your career for the next 20 years. And so I put that resume, I don't know, on like a floppy disk. For those of you who are watching, that's old people speak for on a hard drive. And so, yeah, so like, sometimes you don't know, like I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't know if I can survive outside. Part of the reason I waited to do my master's degree in life was because I wanted to kind of finish a master's degree in something that would be relevant to corporate America. I ended up getting a master's in risk, which, my first day at Twitter was March 9th, and that was the day that was the week that the US basically sent everybody home. So welcome to corporate America and crisis, right? So you can like insert joke here about that, but like it really does, it translates. And I think once you have folks who can help you understand that transition is not going to be that hard, and you recognize that, for me, the effort and attention and energy I had to get up at 2 in the morning to face a victim of a violent crime, I was losing that energy as I got a little older. And I realized that, you can transition to other stuff. You can teach, or you can, do other things that don't require that kind of energy, but that's not really what I wanted to do. And so for me, I just decided if I can't keep, getting myself out of bed at 2:30 in the morning, maybe it's time for the next phase of my life and trying something else that's really interesting and challenging, right? I never want to stop learning. I never want to stop challenging myself. So for me, the transition to corporate America was hard and sad to kind of make it over that hill, but I knew would be super rewarding because I had mentors and friends that were already out and saying, this is fun. You can have fun in this other job too. So that's how it worked for me.
Karen, listening to you speak kind of made me appreciate that while you all are in your jobs doing these incredible things, handling crisis, all the things you've been saying, crisis, life and death situations, surprises, judgment calls, gnarly legal issues, more judgment calls, interpersonal, organizational stuff. All of that is so incredibly valuable in both public and private sector. And I think sometimes what happens is people are so busy doing the job that you don't realize how valuable this work that you've done is in the private sector as well, and how much the private sector benefits and needs you for that. So again, that's going to go back to Allison's point of don't be afraid, or my revision of, or just fake it, like really give yourself more credit, because you might be missing just how amazing you are. And all of you are so amazing. You know, I'm going to kick it over to Dianna with some more questions.
Thank you so much, Judith. Judy, this has been so phenomenal. I'm just so pleased with our panel and the strength of everybody and the inspirational stories and some of the humor that we've heard. And it's just been amazing. And thank you for taking the lead at the beginning there. I'm going to move into the diversity area, something that's very near and dear to me. Given my new role at my firm, and also just a personal experience I had when I was in Citizens Academy with the FBI, which Karen was there almost every night with us. It was fantastic. Like I looked at the room and everybody looked different. Everybody was different ages. Everybody had different skill sets, different jobs, different everything, but we were all the same. And we all were supportive of our country and wanting everybody to be safe and learn a lot of things. And I can't say enough about that program. But I wanted to hear from some of the others about your personal experiences in diversity and some of the benefits that you might see in law enforcement. And I'd like to start with Norma, if I could. So what are some of the benefits of diversity in law enforcement?
The benefits of it. Oh, well, you know, you can't, as someone else was speaking about before, you cannot do your job within law enforcement if you don't know the people that you have to deal with. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I was a brand new officer, I was actually assigned to the World Trade Center. And what I did not know is about the different cultures, particularly some Asian cultures, that you don't look someone directly in the eye. So of course, in law enforcement, we think if we can't look someone in the eye, they're trying to hide something, or they're not being straightforward with us or honest. And that was a learning experience for me to know that it actually was a form of disrespect with some cultures, and I had to learn not to do that. So you have to know, as much as you can about the areas that you're in, that you're patrolling, the people that you're supposed to help. And, and I will take that even after 9/11, I actually went to a lot of seminars that were given by people in the Muslim cultures, and learning the different aspects of that. I just found it very interesting. And it's something that we need to know, especially in this day and age. The different cultures that the police officers that we're asking them to go out and work in these neighborhoods, work in these areas, interview people. And it makes such a difference if you have some knowledge of who you're dealing with, and the people or the victims or the witnesses or whoever you're speaking with. It makes a difference to them if you can, expose upon them that you know something about who they are. It makes a difference in you being able to do your job more readily and more easily.
Okay, I agree. And what kind of guidance can you offer for other women navigating both the challenges and the benefits so they can excel in a traditionally male-dominated profession? And I think Verna, you had some things to say about this.
I think that we tend to, as women, like many of you have said, that we kind of short ourselves sometimes, or we doubt ourselves. And it's funny. About a couple of weeks ago, my sister and I were talking, and she had to ask for a raise during the pandemic. And was it the right time? What was the right amount? And I said to her, "Don't you know yourself your worth? What's your worth? What do you feel you deserve?" And she, and we went back and forth. She goes, well, you think it's the right time? And I said, honestly, what's the worst I can tell you is, no, let's wait another 6 months. No, let's wait another 6 months for evaluation. I said, you still have to put it out there. You still have to request it. I said, don't show yourself short. You've worked hard. You were still going into the office. You were still putting in those hours, even after hours. You know what you deserve. And, she went in, she took my advice, and, they made a negotiation about it. But she said to me, she says, if you did not push me, give me that little extra push, I probably would have not done it. And I think that tends to be what we need. We need more mentors. We need that voice, whispering over our head and saying, just ask. All right, if this door closes, there's going to be another one that opens. Don't stop. If there's something that drives you, that you're passionate about, for example, I took the Women Leadership Institute with Allison. Well, she kind of gave me that extra push, and I was at a crossroad with my decision about my career. I was in a job that I was watching the paint dry, a unit, and I was not happy. But it was in the middle of still recouping from my divorce and trying to raise 2 boys. I was close. I was 15 minutes from home. Okay, but I was miserable. And being among these women, sitting in a mentor conversation, and they're like, you have the opportunity now to teach, be an instructor, something that you're passionate about. And now it's promotional. It's sergeants, lieutenants, and captains, but I'm an hour and a half away. I'm coming from one borough to the other side of the borough. Now it's taking time away from my sons. Now it's taking time. So that balance, that and if it doesn't even have to be children, because I used to get like annoyed when they're like, oh, kids. No, but there's also elderly parents. There are the other things that might be at home that you have to attend to. Now the decision is here. What do? Do I stay 15 minutes close to home, or I drive an hour and a half to 2 hours one way? To do something that I passionately love? Well, I got that push and I did it. And I spoke to my boys and I said, Mama's going to be home less, but she's going to be happier. There's decisions we make in life. And I tell them that even now, I said, there's decisions in life. You need to be happy in what you're doing. You need to feel that passion. And it's not going to be every day. There'll be days when you're going to be off, but most of the time, are you happy at what you're doing? And, I just want to get back on the diversity. To me, I had rookies that never came into the city, that didn't know what there were 5 boroughs, or didn't know, how to travel on train, and here they are policing it. So, you got to be that person to kind of guide. And in my early career, I had bosses that couldn't be bothered with you, that just wanted you, do your job, call me when you need me, but do your job, and it's 25 years, I think about the transition of law enforcement itself, but the transition within NYPD. We've gotten, really great training, and cops fight it sometimes. They fight it. Nancy, this thing was a big issue. But it's how we bring it to the table and how it benefits each other. And I think that's important.
So Nancy, along that same Verna's theme here, and also Mary Jo, how does a diverse workplace better contribute to relationships between law enforcement and the community?
I mean, I don't even think I can find the words, but I'll try. So as law enforcement, we have exactly the amount of power that the people who we serve are willing to give us. And so they want to be able to look at us and see themselves, or see a group of people that reflects them, that understands them. And so just as a vision for an agency to make that a core value and a core principle to reflect the community you serve is just vital. And you lose if you don't tend to that every day. we had a horribly sensitive case where the folks who were in our office, members of the community, they spoke Creole, and with a phone call, we were able to bring up this wonderful lawyer who could speak to them in their language. And that I just can't say enough about how important that is as a core value of an organization. Mary Jo, I'm sure, has other things to say too.
Well, sometimes I think about it from the other perspective as well. There's been plenty of times I've gone out on the street to meet a person and they think, well, you can't be an FBI agent. And there's times that makes me really mad. I've told Dianna, my husband is also an agent. When we travel over the years with small kids, whenever we get to a security checkpoint, we both have badges, guns, and cuffs. But I also have the diaper bag, the formula bag, Polly Pockets, all that jazz. And they would look at my husband and they'd say, her too? She's FBI. And that drives me crazy sometimes. But I think that it makes us, as the unexpected component of law enforcement, work a little harder to bring credibility to the table. And I'm much more conscious when I go into meeting a victim or meeting a subject of getting my point across and being credible. And so I think that having a diverse representation within law enforcement, we who are more diverse are more conscious about our role and getting the job done.
I love that story. The first time I heard
Absolutely.
it, and I loved it again today.
Absolutely, because you need to have the diversity within the departments also, because and exactly to the point, it's been there are some officers that were not that had never been exposed to any type of diversity apparently, and thought nothing of making those comments to other officers. And so you face that too within the departments, while you're telling the officers that they have to go out and they have to interact with the communities that they may serve. You also have to deal with it within the departments with officers that have never had any kind of interactions with different cultures. When me coming up, there weren't a lot of females. There weren't a lot of women that were bosses. So no one wanted to listen to me, and I had to find a way to make them have to listen without, with staying within the guidelines that were given to me within the department. So it's absolutely true.
So Karen, how does gender potentially impact communications with victims and defendants? Should that be an issue, and how can that be addressed?
I think it's always an issue. It doesn't have to be a dominant issue, but I think it's always an issue. I think it's important to remember that diversity means variety. So if we hire diversely and we assign jobs diversely, we will inherently have that diversity. It's not diverse when 4 women show up to talk to a victim who may have been victimized by a woman. So we have to be careful. We need, and the Bureau really seeks this. Jackie talked about this, that we seek law enforcement, prior law enforcement. We seek prior military. We seek prior attorneys. We seek prior scientists. We try to hire in a way that builds diversity into the DNA of the organization, and we all need to do better with that. All private companies, public companies, we all need to do better with that. But that's kind of part of what this is. I would say more important for me than diversity is, sorry, I think I froze. Sorry, more important for me in diversity is really a diversity of thought. That we have folks who show up and say, okay, you may not, I may not know your culture. So teach me what I should do for you. Do you want me to take my shoes off? I'll take my shoes off before I come in. Do you want me to not touch you? As a general rule, I don't touch people, but because you never know who's put hands on them before, right? So thinking diversely, it wouldn't bother me if any of you came and touched me. It wouldn't bother me at all, but I'm also not the victim of a violent crime. We don't know how people grew up. So just thinking diversely, I think, is far more important than actually having a gender or a race diversity going on. That makes sense?
Yeah, that does. I think that's really helpful information. We are getting a little, a bit of a time predicament, I wanted to move into some of the recruitment questions that we wanted to talk about. So Verna, Courtney, and Norma, what advice can you offer for younger women and girls interested in entering law enforcement? And I'll start with you, Courtney.
I think, know the requirements of the job that you're interested in, talk to people, be sure of the organization you want to be a part of, and just know that you can achieve whatever you want to achieve. I mean, I'm doing interviewing for the FBI for so long that it's just not just about it's not only the degree that you receive. I think Jackie mentioned earlier. It's really the unique experiences you bring to the table. So we have so many candidates for this position. So people will say, should I get my law degree or my accounting degree? And it's what you're passionate about, getting enough experience, and then coming to the panel, to the interview phase, and really bringing forth something that's been unique to you, whether it's in your personal life, professional life, academics, but something that makes you stand out.
Okay. And how about you, Verna? What are your thoughts?
I mean, for us, you have to take a civil servant exam, and that's the start of it. What I would advice I would give those out there is, especially the generation that is all social media, is you are looked at based on what you post. So what you found funny 6 months ago, and you're going into an interview or you're going through the process of becoming a police officer, might not be funny anymore. So that's one advice I would give, is it's based on this generation is it's Snapchat, it's Instagram, it's Facebook, there's so many out there. And I had this conversation with my teenage boys. What you put out there, and once you put it out there, it's no longer yours. It's no longer your ownership. It's the ownership to anybody else that's looking out there. So, my one big advice I would say during your process, if you want to become a New York City police officer, it's look at your social media. When you're going to do the application process and you're going to drop off that application, right? You might not have that interview right away, but physical appearance, that's a big thing too. It's like being, they say when you come into an interview, you have to look a certain way, and I would say yes, you do. But diversity, yes, we want. We want. I think about it. From the beginning of my career to now. I mean, I've seen more women in this force than I've ever seen it in my career, and it's wonderful. And it's the background itself. Some are lawyers, some are have their MBA. It's a diverse group of people, and we need that. We need those faces out there. One of the most difficult things I think and I don't want to generalize here, but one of the most difficult aspects I think for women is the job standard test. Going over that 5 feet wall is not easy. If you've never worked out in your life, or if you've never been a physical person, like if you want to take this job, you could Google so much stuff now. They actually show you a video on the process of the physical aspect of this job. There's research there. If you want to know, okay, what is it that I have to do? What's the physical aspect of this job? What is the screening process? How long does it take? I decided, when I saw these questions, I just decided to myself, let me just Google, because when I was on, there was such thing as this information that is in today. Really, I had to just wing it in the sense, and I was a little bit old when I joined the police force. I was 27 years old. So, I was around 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds, and you kind of take that kind of leadership role and showing them, what happens here. Once you walk through those walls into law enforcement, and your reputation is going to follow you no matter where you go. because they're gonna say, oh, you're getting Sergeant Tusado. She's gonna come to work in your unit. Oh yeah, tell me, here comes a phone call. So tell me really what's her deal? What is she good? Is she, but you have to, and I would stress this to even to the female recruits that came into the academy. I would take that small group and say, if you seriously, you have to act seriously. You have to take this job. If this is your career, this is not something that you're going to say, oh, and I might be for everyone either. But if this is your career and this is something that you feel you want to do, then you have to take it seriously. And like I said, there's so much information out there on the process of being a New York City police officer, which I'm sure is the same with the other law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, I did want to jump into that. So Jackie, we have here an FBI recruiting slide, and I also wanted to hear from you. Should recruitment campaigns change, and are there enough women involved in recruiting women to the job?
I think we could always do better. I think Allison earlier had spoken about the conference she had been at, and it was great because it was women who had been in their careers who are reaching back and pulling others along up with them. And I think that's so important. I think we're all at points in our careers or retired, and I certainly think about it a lot of what can I do to give back? How could, as the expression goes, how could we leave this place better than we found it? And part of that is recruiting, getting good people in. So I know in the FBI, our gender diversity numbers have improved over the past years. I think a few years back, we got over 20%, which we were kind of stuck at that 20% mark or just under it for a number of female agents. But we have surpassed that. So our numbers are improving. But I think we could always do better. We could always get more people involved. Get the younger employees who just came on, talk about their stories of why they joined. So I think we're doing a better job than we have in the past, at least in the Bureau, but there's definitely, more room to grow there as we get more involved and really do events like this, talk about the value, talk about not only the value that we get out of the job, but the value that we as women can add to the job. And just to make a note on the previous conversation of diversity, I think it's important to note when I went through the academy, perhaps my FBI colleagues heard the same thing, that the best compliment you could get is hearing that you're a good agent. It's just a simple sentence, but if you say, hey, they're really a good agent, that is the highest compliment that you could get from your colleagues. And I think it's important to women who are interested in law enforcement, don't join to be a good female agent, join to be a good agent. You're an equal, act like it, serve like it, and just be a good agent. And I think it's important to support each other, but also to remember that we have a seat at the table, we belong at the table, and we all just need to be good agents at the end of the day.
I think so too. So does anyone else have any closing comments they'd like? We've got about a minute left. I just can't thank you all enough.
I'll just say, that's what I was going to say. Thank you for having me. It's very interesting listening to all the wonderful careers and everything that all the other women on the board had to say. And as far as recruiting, just when you want to when you choose law enforcement, just prepare yourself. Prepare for what you need to be prepared for, as far as not just physically, but mentally. And like was stated by Bernadette, there's lots of avenues that you can take now. So I would say get on board, try it out, because it's a wonderful, wonderful life. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you all so much for participating today. And there's talk about not enough women in law enforcement, but the most powerful message is look at the rock stars here who are in it and doing great things. And to spend this time today with so many of you, smart, powerful, compassionate, great judgment, thoughtful, and also generous with your time and your advice. So thank you one and all. It was a pleasure speaking with you today and very inspiring.
Thank you.
Keep in touch.
Thank
This
you.
has been
Thank
this has been
you.
fabulous.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, wonderful.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Judy and
You
Diana.
too. Be safe.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.